Amy has worked in the field of long-term care in San Diego for nearly 20 years in care management, dementia care, and community health education. She holds a joint Master's of Social Work and Master's of Public Health from San Diego State University and is a certified positive approach to care dementia trainer. Amy is the Education and Outreach Manager for Alzheimer San Diego, a local nonprofit organization whose mission is helping families today while finding a cure for tomorrow. Please join me in welcoming Amy.
Apparently I have to stand over here because I don't have a clicker, so bear with me. I'll try to keep this from blocking our view of each other as much as possible. Can you all hear me okay? Yes. Okay. This is a great echoey room. I love it. Wonderful. I want to make a little update to the format that he introduced. It's actually, it's not questions time permitting. I intend for us to have lots of time for Q&A here this afternoon. I'm going to run through those 5 things that I think everyone who's got someone with dementia in their life needs to know. I'm going to run through them fairly quickly, just so that I've covered them, the basics of what I think you need to know. And my friend Kevin over here is helping me distribute a copy of those 5 things. So you'll have them for reference. And then my hope is that we can spend the rest of our time, after I get through that kind of quickly, just talking. You can truly feel free to ask me any type of question, well, you know, within reason. Nothing personal, you guys, but within reason, right? Anything. If it's something that I covered, you feel I covered a little too quickly and you want to dig in on one of those subjects, or if there's something else altogether. When you're asking questions, I'll probably repeat them so that I can make sure everybody else in the room heard them. And I'll also just say it right now, I very well may not know the answer. I can't solve every problem as much as I wish that I could. They don't train us to do that in social work school, but I will do my very best. I may have an idea, I may not, but I will probably be able to point you toward a resource. So what I want to point out to you before I get started is the second page, the number 5, a little preview of number 5, is a pretty extensive list of a lot of local resources. Many of those organizations are here today. Some of them are not, but most of them are. So again, if I'm not able to answer a particular question, I imagine that somebody within one of those organizations probably can. So let's go ahead and get started. Number 1, a question I get all the time. You heard that I work for a local nonprofit called Alzheimer's San Diego. Alzheimer's disease is just one kind of dementia, right? And so many people feel that they are not eligible to use our services because, well, we don't have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. Either we've not gotten a diagnosis yet, or we have, and it's not Alzheimer's disease. So I want to start out by saying our services, and the services of all of the providers here in San Diego County who serve people with Alzheimer's disease, are available to anybody who's caring for anyone with any type of memory loss, cognitive impairment, any type of dementia. A common question that I will get is, well, you know, I know that he or she has some kind of dementia. I'm pretty sure, right? Based on what I'm seeing, based on the symptoms that we've been observing for a while, it looks like Alzheimer's disease. Or my mom had vascular dementia, and this looks the same. So I think that this is probably vascular dementia. Why do I need to know? Right? If there's no cure for Alzheimer's disease, then what is the point in getting a diagnosis? Has anybody thought that to themselves before? You don't have to fess up. It's okay. It's very common. But getting a diagnosis absolutely does matter. At least doing all that we can to try to get an accurate diagnosis. It's not always possible. Just want to say that. Getting a diagnosis is not an easy process in most cases. These diseases are hard to figure out. We don't yet have good, what we call biomarkers, where we can just run a simple test and say, yep, this is Alzheimer's disease, or this is Lewy body dementia, or this is vascular dementia, or this is a treatable and reversible kind of dementia. Right? We're not there yet in terms of the technology. We're getting closer, but we're not there yet. It is important to recognize, though, that there are over 100 different types of dementia. Dementia is not a specific disease. Dementia is really a set of symptoms. We call it a syndrome. It's a set of symptoms that are caused by something else. The most common cause? Alzheimer's disease. About 75% of the time, dementia is caused by Alzheimer's disease, or some combination of Alzheimer's and some other type of pathology. But there are dozens of other causes of these symptoms. So why is it important that we figure out what's causing it? First of all, because there are actually treatable and reversible types of dementia. There are syndromes that we would sometimes call a pseudo-dementia, a situation like depression, a thyroid condition, a low-functioning thyroid, a medication interaction, an infection that causes a delirium of some kind, malnutrition, chronic dehydration, sleep deprivation. These are just a handful of medical conditions that, while difficult to treat, can be treated and can either be reversed or at the very least improved. So it's really important that we seek, when we're noticing changes, that we detect those changes and we seek that diagnosis, because we very well could be living with a condition, that person could very well be living with a condition that could in fact be improved. If they do have Alzheimer's disease, or Parkinson's disease, Parkinson's-related dementia, or frontotemporal dementia, Lewy body dementia, if they also have one of those other conditions that I just mentioned, depression, a thyroid problem, malnutrition, right? Exposure to a toxin, perhaps, a medication interaction, that medical condition is treatable, and if treated, will improve the symptoms of the Alzheimer's disease or whatever other type of progressive dementia may be in place there. So the important message there is that it is in fact important to know. And it's actually really important to know not just that it's something treatable and reversible, but if it is a progressive neurodegenerative condition like Alzheimer's or vascular dementia or frontotemporal or Lewy body, why is it important to know which one? So an example I'll give you is you're having a problem with your lungs, right? You go to, right on cue, you're coughing. Thank you. You've been living with a chronic cough for a very long time. And it is becoming disruptive to your life. It's disrupting presentations when you get to that. But it's keeping you up at night, right? You're not feeling well, you're losing sleep, you're exhausted. It really is starting to become a functional impairment. So you go to the doctor and you are run through a set of tests, right? What might they be looking for? If you have a chronic persistent cough, what might they look for? Bronchitis, right? Lung cancer,
pneumonia,
reflux, pneumonia. You might have a simple cold, right? You might have, lots of different things might be causing that cough. So what they're going to do is a whole bunch of lab work, most likely, right? They're probably going to ask for some imaging. They're going to listen to your lungs. They're going to run all of this, do this whole workup. Now, what if the next day the doctor called you back and said, well, we've done all of our tests, and sure enough, you definitely have a cough. That's a little bit like a doctor telling you, you have dementia, right? Dementia is a set of symptoms. I know we have dementia. I know that there's memory changes. I know that we have cognitive impairment, that there's been changes to that person's behavior, changes to their personality. I've noticed some physical functional changes. But why, right? As with a diagnosis of that cough, right? What's actually causing it? If we get an accurate diagnosis of that type of dementia, we now know how to treat it. We can think about appropriate treatment. We can think about how to manage those symptoms. Let's say it is something chronic and not curable, like a very aggressive cancer, like COPD, right? It is a condition that we're not going to be able to just prescribe some antibiotics and it's going to go away. So you still want to know what's causing that, because that particular illness has got its own particular set of symptoms. It has its own predictable path, what it might look like, what symptoms we can expect to see, and we can develop an appropriate treatment plan, care plan. We can make appropriate plans as an individual or as a family, as a support system based on the information that we now have, right? So too with diseases in our brain, right? We want to know, is it Alzheimer's disease? Is it Lewy body dementia? Is it vascular? For a variety of reasons. They're going to have different progressions, right? They last for different amounts of time. They present a different type of symptom. Vascular dementia, for example, doesn't have that long, slow decline in most cases that we see in Alzheimer's disease. We'll see this sort of drop in function, and then the person will kind of level off for a little while, and then we might see another decline in function. If we know that, if we're prepared for that, right, we can not be so frightened, not be so frustrated or mystified by this disease when we see those symptoms emerge. And while we do not yet have a cure for Alzheimer's disease, we do not yet have effective forms of treatment for the disease itself, we do know a lot about how to manage the symptoms of these diseases, some of which I will be talking about as we go along here. So there are medications that can be used if we catch the disease in the early stages. We now know that those medications, Aricept, Namenda, and all the others, there's only 5, we know that they are only effective if we start them while the person is in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease or a few other types of dementia. But what's important is to say about that is that some of those medications are not useful in other types of dementia. We wouldn't want to have somebody on Aricept, Namenda, if it's contraindicated with the particular type of dementia that they have, right? Or we might want to know, for example, if a person has Lewy body dementia, this is just an example. They've got Lewy body dementia, and they also experience a severe behavioral disturbance, or they have a chronic mental illness. We don't want a person with Lewy body dementia taking an antipsychotic, right? Because there's lots of very well documented problems, interactions in that case. Those are the types of treatment decisions, care planning decisions that doctors can't make, that families can't make if we don't have an accurate diagnosis. So it does matter. Number 2, changes, all this stuff that you're dealing with. Changes in your relationship with this person, your day-to-day communications. If all of this seems really hard to you, it's not because you're doing it wrong, right? It's because it really, truly is hard. These diseases, Alzheimer's and other types of dementia, are exceptionally challenging. This is a different kind of caregiving than any other kind of caregiving that any of us have done before. And one of the greatest challenges of this disease is that even if you have cared for someone with dementia before, the second time around, it doesn't look anything like the first time. So every time we're coming into this as a newbie, every time we're unprepared for exactly what symptoms we're going to see, right? So an important thing to remember in the day-to-day, intellectually, I know you all know this, but it's really hard to sort of forget it. When it's really easy to forget it, I should say, when you're in the day-to-day. They cannot change what's happening in their brain. As much as I know, it often feels like they are saying and doing things just to get your goat, right? Just to be manipulative. I know I myself had a parent with a long-time vascular and frontotemporal dementia. I get it. I was sure he was choosing to not remember conversations that we had had, and I was sure that the things he had selective memory, right? Oh, you thought that too? Yeah, I was sure that the unkind things he said to me, right, were somehow an underlying communication of how he always really felt, right? This is not true, right? That person cannot change the disease, the pathology, the path of what's happening in their brain. And it's really on us. We're the ones who can change. We're the ones who can take a deep breath, right? Regroup, say to ourselves, what I am seeing in this moment is a symptom of that person's disease, right? We can't see any outward changes in people with dementia. It's one of the great frustrations of this disease. They look exactly the same. And often, depending on where you are in the disease, they're doing everything. They act a lot of the time they're acting the same way. They're still functioning pretty normally most of the time, and then bam, there's just a moment where there's a really unkind word or a decision that gets made that's just not like something they would have done in the past, right? It really catches you off guard. Be kind to yourself. Give yourself a moment to take a deep breath and feel a little sadness and a little grief about that, right? Every time there's a new change, every time there's a new symptom, we have to adapt. Okay, that's where we are today. He or she has lost this particular ability, or he or she has a new behavior, a new feature of their personality that now I'm going to have to get to know. Right? Be kind to yourself, but know that you do have the capacity to change your responses, even though you can't change anything about what's going on in their brain. Another one of those things I probably don't need to tell you, but it bears reinforcement. We can't win arguments with people with dementia. You can't. I've been trying it all my life. You can't do it. Reminding people of what they have forgotten. Remember, I told you I was coming today at 11 o'clock. Who said that? We've all done it. Yeah. Correcting. No. Today is Saturday, not Sunday. Right? And arguing with people. Right? It's so natural. That is how humans communicate. When I hear something that is factually incorrect, it's like my imperative to tell you that you're wrong, right? And to tell you what is the correct set of facts here. What we need to do in communicating with people with dementia is learn to listen to the meaning behind the words that are being said. Let go of the actual words. Let go of the facts, right? Respond to the emotions that are being communicated. A very important skill that we need to develop as caregivers of people living with dementia is learning how to tell little white lies. I like to call these therapeutic fiblets, right? It's a little white lie that is not told out of malice. It is not told to be deceitful or to hurt the person. It is a little white lie that maybe withholds some information that you think if they have that information, it's probably not going to be helpful to either one of you, right? Withholding a little information, changing the facts a little bit in order to make this scenario more comfortable for that person, in order to create a good moment for them, in order to create a good day for both of you, right? So when that person wants to know, where is my car, right? It's usually out there in the driveway. I haven't seen it. The factual answer is, well, the doctor told you a month ago that you can't drive anymore because you have Alzheimer's disease, and so I sold your car, right? So enjoy the rest of your afternoon. It's all pretty much going to go downhill from there, right? Whereas, so that's the honest answer. The kind answer is something along the lines of, oh, Jimmy next door, his car broke down, he needed to borrow it. He's going to bring it back tomorrow, right? Whatever works in your particular situation. If you don't happen to have a Jimmy next door, don't use that particular line, right? But something along those lines, right? There are ways that we can use, and I don't mean to be glib about this, but we can use a person's short-term recall problems to their advantage, to our own as well, but certainly to theirs. And there's nothing hurtful, harmful, or deceitful about that, right? In that moment, being kind, giving them an explanation that made them feel okay, that made them still feel kind of in charge of their own life, rather than someone has taken something away from you, right? That was a kindness, and that's important. So, anyone have this phenomenon where the person that you care for is constantly packing a bag or constantly trying to get ready because they need to go, right? They need to go home, right? It could be they need to go to work, they need to go home, right? So the honest response there, and I'm not kidding you, I have a girlfriend who took care of her grandmother. I told her, when she told me this story, I said, friend, I am going to use this story in every class I ever teach the rest of my career because it was so lovely. Her grandmother, she took care of her in her home, and she wanted to go home always. She was in her own home that she'd lived in for 50 years. This was her family home. And Grandma went outside, they were out in the front yard, and when it was time to go back in, she wouldn't go back in because that wasn't her house, right? You can't just go into other people's houses, right? No, I want to go back to my house. And granddaughter was stuck. What on earth am I going to do? She literally went into the office of the house and took out the deed to the house, got the paperwork. She was correcting, she was arguing with her. She found the deed to Grandma's house and showed her, that's your name, that's this house address, that's this street, this is the year you bought this house. Grandma, this is your house. Right? Do you think that worked? I mean, no way, right? I don't know exactly what her response was. I no longer remember how that story ended. But it was something along the lines of, well, I mean, anyone can make up a document like this, right? When confronted with the facts, that doesn't necessarily change things, right? You see your reality right now, right? Whatever color you think my dress is, and that's tricky because it's not. It's kind of gray, it's kind of blue, right? But if I were to tell you that this is in fact a red dress, right? Look, it looks exactly the same color as her sweater, right? We could argue all day long. You will never convince me that this is a blue dress. I see it as red, right? That's the same thing with the reality of a person with dementia. Think of it like looking at colors. Think of it as tasting things. You know that whole thing with cilantro? Some people taste cilantro and they love it. Some people taste it and it tastes like soap, right? You can't convince a person who tastes the soap that it tastes delicious, right? It doesn't matter how much you love it. It doesn't matter, right? No matter how confident, how clear my friend was that this was her grandma's house, right? The facts did not matter in that situation. What might have been a more helpful response? How might she have responded to the emotion? What was the emotion Grandma was really expressing when she said, I don't want to go in there, that's not my house? Fear, confusion, yeah. Yeah, disorientation, right? For whatever reason, she did not interpret this to be her house. So go there, right? Go where the person is. Connect to, we don't have to necessarily play along, right? And get into some lengthy delusion about whose house this is that you're going into. But if you can, what we call, validate that person's emotions, right? Yeah, I can see that you don't want to go in there. Right? I wouldn't want to go in there either, right? Or you know what? I know it's a little weird, but these are my friends and we're just going to be there for another few hours, right? Whatever it is. We actually teach improvisation classes at Alzheimer San Diego just for this purpose, for helping caregivers learn to kind of think on their feet. It's a really fun way to practice this. If you ever want to sign up, I highly recommend it. But you don't have to be a master of improvisation to do that. Listen for the words that are being said. A person that's telling you, in the morning that they've got to get to work, right? What are they really saying?
They're anxious.
Yeah, they're anxious. They're disoriented. They're confused. Clearly, there's probably something they want to do, something purposeful. They want to get back to doing something that made them feel good, that made them, could feel like they were contributing something. Whatever kind of work they used to do, connect to that feeling. Help them find something that's meaningful and purposeful to do, right? I know, right? There's a lot of power in just saying things like, yeah, I know, or I understand, or I would feel that way too. Or on the opposite side of that, there's also a lot of power in just saying, I'm sorry, right? When somebody's really upset, it's really hard to stay angry at somebody, actively angry at somebody who's just apologized to you. Right? My husband has learned this quick with me. Right? When I'm really, really mad, he can very quickly diffuse me just by saying, you're right. Right? I'm still kind of mad and I still kind of want to keep fighting, but where am I going to go with that now? I don't really have anywhere else to go. Right? That works with people with dementia as well. Right? When they're frustrated with you, when they're angry, when they're feeling anxious, simply say, I know this is hard. Right? I'm really sorry. Or, I messed that up. I did that the wrong way. Let me try it again. Right? Or, let's just try that later. Right? Whatever you can do to sort of throw up the white flag, give that person an apology, the better. It's all about validating their experience. Number 3, taking what's called the positive approach to care can help. And I will try to be brief here because this is a big topic. Has anybody heard of Tifa Snow? Yeah, handful of folks. Yeah, she is a wonderful, she developed a method that is called the positive approach to care. And on your resource list on the back there, you'll see a reference to her website. She is an occupational therapist out on the East Coast who has really transformed how we understand the changes that happen in people's brains when they have Alzheimer's and other kinds of dementia. A couple of key things that she's taught us from the occupational therapist perspective is to understand that people with dementia frequently experience a significant narrowing of their visual field. Something that, when I learned this, it absolutely transformed everything about the way that I interact with people with dementia. Most of us, when we're young, we have this crazy wide visual field that's like, I can't even like move my shoulders back there when I was in my 20s, right? Now my field of vision is right around here, right? When I'm in my 60s, I can expect it to be right around here. Our field of vision naturally narrows as we get older. People living with dementia have exceptionally narrow fields of vision. I wouldn't be able to see you. I wouldn't be able to see this entire half of the room, right? If I were in the moderate stages of Alzheimer's disease or another kind of dementia right now, and I were looking straight forward, right? That explains a lot. It explains a lot about why they need to really focus on what they're doing. It explains why depth perception is so dramatically changed in people with dementia. And it also explains a lot about why we're constantly startling them, causing anxiety, causing fear, when we're really attempting to be helpful. We're being loving, right? We know this person, right? So changes to their visual field are very common, as are other types of sensory processing changes. So I might be able to hear, for example, if that door were to open, I would hear it. And if then, as I'm talking, somebody comes into my field of vision, it's going to make sense because I heard that door open, right? My brain's doing a lot of complex cognitive work there to make all of that make sense to me, right? When a person has dementia, and of course there's different stages of the disease, and this will get worse over time in most cases, but the brain of a person with dementia cannot do that type of complex cognitive task to make sense of sensory information, what it's seeing, what it's hearing, what it's tasting, what it's feeling on the skin. Right? This explains so much about so many of the symptoms that we see. It's not that they can't hear. It's not that they can't feel pain, hot, cold. It's that their brain doesn't necessarily interpret that information the way that it used to. And so Teepa Snow, in developing the positive approach to care, she developed this method, and you may have heard that in my introduction. Myself and many of the other staff at Alzheimer's San Diego were certified in this method. In developing the positive approach to care, what she teaches us, and what we now teach to families as often as we can, is that by being mindful of those changes that have happened to that person's visual field and other sensory processing information, in addition to all those memory, behavior, cognitive changes that we all know so well, if we keep that in mind, what that leads us to do is to make sure that we're being really careful about how we enter a person's personal space. If we sort of do a little bit of legwork up front, slow ourselves down, not assume that it's okay to just walk right into anybody else's personal space, right? We need to be mindful of that at all times. I wouldn't just walk right up and stand in your personal space, right? I certainly shouldn't be doing that even to my own mother, to my own husband, my brother, my friends, either. People need to have a sense of agency, a sense of control over their body and over the space around them. That doesn't change just because you have dementia. And so what she teaches us, and we don't have the time today to teach the method, but I want you to know that there are resources out there for learning this. What she teaches is to make a visual connection. Make sure the person sees you before you try to make an approach. Then make a verbal, an oral, introduce yourself, right? However you do that. If it's saying your name and who you are and why you're there, or if it's just saying hello, because you know that they're oriented and you know that they know who you are, right? Whatever makes sense in that moment with that particular person. Taking the time to make the visual contact and the verbal contact, they know who you are, or at the very least, they know you're a person who looks pretty nice, right? You don't look scary to them, they see you before you come in and make that physical approach. That can mitigate a lot of their discomfort with the kind of care, with the kind of help that we're trying to provide. It can mitigate a lot of disorientation. And when it comes to helping a person with personal care, I'm telling you that this method is gold, right? Instead of just walking up to a person with a sharp object and trying to put it in their mouth, right? A fork, a toothbrush, whatever, a flossing utensil, whatever it might be, right? If we're making a slow, positive physical approach with that person, we get into a position that she calls hand under hand. We're basically holding hands together. Their hand is on top, my hand is underneath. I'm controlling everything that's going on, but they feel that they are in charge of this situation, right? We are brushing their teeth together. It's truly been transformative. So changing the way we physically approach a person with dementia can make all the difference. And at the same time, being really mindful of how your language sounds, right? Speaking as clearly, as slowly, as directly, and as best you can, as friendly as possible. Keeping in mind that when you're exhausted, when you're frustrated, when you're answering the same question for the 10th time in the last hour, right? And you respond accordingly. And who among us wouldn't, by the 10th time, answer it with a little bit of unkindness in our voice, right? We do that. It's natural. They hear it too. They feel it too. They don't understand why you're so mad. They don't remember having asked it the first 9 times, right? To them, this is a new question, and you're giving the answer for the first time. So we have to, again, take that deep breath. It's often people, by the way, if one of the questions you were planning to ask me was, how do I get them to stop asking me the same question? Don't bother. I don't have the answer to that one. I do have some ideas about finding the trigger, what might be starting it, but we don't have a way to stop that. That's a matter of, think about, they can't change that thing that's happening in their brain. We change our response. Answer it as though it's the first time, right? With kindness, directness, right, and warmth. So in that example that I gave you of the toothbrush, right? Learning to do things with people with dementia makes all the difference. I'm not going to come in and brush your teeth for you. Now it's time for us to brush our teeth, right? People with dementia, depending on where they are in the disease process, can often do quite a lot for themselves if we give them the visual cues, right? Pick up the fork, put the food in your own mouth, right? Take the pills, or if you're not taking pills, eat Skittles, right? Eat grapes, I don't know. Eat something small, right? Show the person what it is that you want them to do. Almost any one of us, if I walked up to you right now and went, right? Yeah, right? You get it. You know just what I mean. We're very adept, and we don't lose that, at being able to interpret other people's visual cues. You show the person what it is that you want them to do. Instead of, now it's time for me to give you your shower, right? Who among us is going to get excited about that, right? None of us, right? Instead, it's time to get ready. Let's go get ready, right? It's something that we're going to do together. Learning to do things with people and not doing them to them or for them. Number 4, don't give up. It's never too late to keep your brain as healthy as possible and to keep their brain as healthy as possible. Right? We don't yet have an effective form of treatment, medically speaking or lifestyle-wise either. I can't tell you, do Lumosity for 1 hour a day, and you won't get it, and it will make your loved one's symptoms get better. Right? We're just not there yet. We haven't figured that out just yet. At least not something that works on a large scale. But there's every reason to keep eating brain-healthy food, or to start eating brain-healthy food as early as possible. The Mediterranean diet is primarily what is recommended. Right? Lots of vegetables, those dark leafy greens, lots of fruits, especially those dark berries. Eating lots of good, healthy fats. Brains need fat. Low-fat diets have been really bad for our brain health. We have to get back to eating fat, but eating the good fat, like the kind that comes from nuts, from seeds, from things like avocados, right? Fish, those nice fatty cold water fish. I have a great acronym for that. If you like fish and you, like me, have trouble remembering what kind of fish is good, they're called smash fish. Has anyone heard this? I love this. It changed my life. Smash. Salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. Isn't that great? Smash fish. Yeah. There's your quickest tip of the day. Exercise. There's probably nothing for which there is more evidence in terms of the value in brain health than getting regular exercise. This goes for all of us, and it also goes for people with dementia. Right? Our brain is the biggest user of our blood supply. Every time your heart pumps, 25% of it, ideally, should be getting up to your brain. That's a lot of work, and as you're aging, your cardiovascular system is becoming less efficient. It's harder and harder to keep enough blood flowing to your brain, and exercise helps with that. It not only keeps the cardiovascular system working more efficiently, but it also increases the number and the size of the blood vessels that supply blood to the brain. We also know that exercise in people with dementia, there's great research out on this. Exercise not only is shown in people with mild cognitive impairment and very early dementia, that it actually improves memory and cognitive function, which is very exciting. But it also helps in people in the later stages of the disease. It helps with sleep function, probably no surprise there. Helps with sleep, and when they sleep better, you sleep better. This is good for everyone. And it also helps with agitation and anxiety, both of which worry, right? All of which are pretty common in people with Alzheimer's and other kinds of dementia. So regular exercise. What does that mean? You know, that's up to you, your loved one, and their doctor, right? How much, what's the right kind, you know, but getting that heart rate up, getting a little bit of a good sweat on a regular basis is known to dramatically improve brain health. And then finally, staying cognitively and socially engaged, no matter where we are in this disease process, right? It is never too late to introduce the person to new experiences. That may change over the course of the disease. You may no longer travel internationally, right, as travel becomes more difficult, but maybe you can look at picture books. Maybe you can eat foods from special places you have been together, watch documentaries, right, looking at images and having other types of multisensory experiences to bring them, right, to bring that experience to them. Staying cognitively engaged, having novel experiences, doing things, when our brains are healthy, we do want to challenge our brain. We want to do those tough puzzles. We want to take a new route home and see if we can find our way, right? We want to challenge ourselves in that way. That's not necessarily helpful with people with dementia. Don't test them. Don't go through the photo album and quiz them on every picture that's in there. We love to do this. Who's that? Right? What year was that? Right? This is not helpful. But the experience of going through the memories and talking about whatever's coming up for them, that's a lovely reminiscence activity, a cognitively stimulating activity, and something that can be very pleasing and very soothing without being challenging. And then staying socially engaged. This is very important. People with dementia, frequently their inner life is getting quieter and quieter, right? Their ability to sit down with a book, to sit down with a newspaper, to watch a program, the news, a movie, and really get what they used to get out of it. That's declining for them, right, as their cognitive function is declining. So people that were always kind of loners, they never really liked going to clubs or being around other people. So no, I'm not going to take them to a day program because they would hate that. I hear that all the time. And it really is important that we bring social activity to people with dementia and not rely on them to tell us that they do or do not want to do these things. Most people with dementia are not able to initiate activity in this way. Right? If I say to you, do you want to go walk down to the coffee shop? Right? The answer, no matter how much I love walking to that coffee shop, is very likely to be no. Right? Because if I say no, I know that nothing about my current situation here is going to change. I'm not totally sure what you mean when you say, let's walk to the coffee shop. Right? I can't necessarily think a few steps ahead and imagine, is it a nice day outside? Are my feet going to hurt? Is the sidewalk cracked? Who's going to be there? What am I going to have to do? Am I going to have to talk to somebody? Right? So, no, the answer is no. I'm fine here. I'll stay here. Right? Social isolation, withdrawal, is not only a common symptom of Alzheimer's and other kinds of dementia, it is gaining repute as a possible cause of Alzheimer's and other kinds of dementia. Human beings are primates. We are wired for social connectivity. It is not good for our brains to spend too much time alone, to spend too much time without engaging and interacting with other people. And it does not matter the state of your brain health. That applies for all of us. So staying socially connected in whatever way is comfortable and makes sense for them. Gardening is my favorite example of all of these things because you can do all of it at the same time if it's a vegetable garden, right? You can grow healthy food and then you can eat it. You're getting a little bit of exercise and fresh air, and you're staying, planting a garden and tending to a garden. As a notorious brown thumb, I know that's cognitively challenging, and it's also social, right? If there's other people involved, but there's lots of other things that you can do. Right, playing games, going on walks, listening to the radio, playing music together, singing along to music, even better. Right, there's lots of different things that we can do. All of these activities are made more impactful. They have a synergistic effect when we do them together. Right, the social elements of it. And then finally, it's just important to remember that you cannot do this alone. I have never in my 20 years in this field known anybody who successfully got through the journey of caring for another person with dementia all by themselves. Right? You've heard the expression, one of my favorite expressions is that you can't pour from an empty cup. I love this. Right? You can't serve from an empty vessel is another way to put it. Right? If your cup has run dry, what do you have to give to the person with dementia? Being able to do all those other things that I talked about in the first 4 points. Right? You need a little bit of a supply of energy, of support. You need to have had at least a couple good nights sleep, maybe have had a good meal or two in the last week. Right? If you haven't had time to get to your own doctor, when was the last time you had a dental cleaning? What's the state of your financial affairs? Right? Is the person with dementia currently listed as your power of attorney? Right? Light bulb just went off and a couple different, oh my gosh, it's time, right? Are you keeping up with your own stuff? Are you seeing your friends? Are you getting to a religious service, a book club, a coffee class that's important to you? Right? If your cup is not as full as you'd like it to be, or you suspect there might be a slow leak somewhere in there, right, a crack. That is what we're here for, right? That not just Alzheimer's San Diego, there is an entire community of your friends, of your family, of your neighbors, but all of us here in the helping professions here in San Diego County, that is what we're here for. To say, consider us your life preserver, right? There are support groups out there. We operate nearly 40 of them throughout San Diego County, 6 days a week, days, evenings, all over the county. We've got specialty groups. If you speak Spanish or Korean, we've got support groups. If you're caring for someone with a particular type of dementia, right, it doesn't matter. We have support groups. Many other organizations run tremendous support groups. There is nothing more powerful than being around, and you'll probably see this here today, being around a group of other people who just understand not only the frustrations and the challenges of caring for a person with dementia, but also the sort of, sometimes it's funny, right? There are moments of absurdity that you just want to share with someone else who gets it, right? There are moments of absolute pure joy. A woman came up to me earlier this afternoon at the event. She came up to my table and shared with me, oh my God, I think of this, it was so sweet. She shared that her husband is pretty late in his Alzheimer's journey, has been not too verbal in the last year or so. They were looking at an old photograph together from a time when they were both younger and pretty robust, and it was a moment after they had just played a game of volleyball, and they were all sweaty, arms around each other. And he, who doesn't talk too much anymore, looked at her and said, "We've had a really good life." No, just there are moments of pure bliss, pure joy. There are moments of pure ridiculousness. There are moments of frustration, and there's nothing quite like the power of a group of peers who really get it, where you can really share those experiences in a safe, understanding, supportive place. So there's a wide range of resources on the back side of that handout. I hope you will avail yourself of them. And now, ask me anything. Let's do it. Yes?
How can you tell the difference between a normal cognitive impairment as you age and the onset of dementia?
Great question. So he asked, could everyone hear it, or do you want me to repeat it? Okay. He asked, how can you tell the difference between normal cognitive impairment and something that might potentially be a problem, something that might be a symptom? So the basic threshold that we use, two thresholds that a doctor would use. One, does it represent a significant change from baseline for you? Right? So there are people like me. I have a terrible working memory. I have a great memory for faces. Probably every one of you here, if I saw you tomorrow, I'd know that you were here in this session today. Right? It might take me a second to figure that out. I have a great memory for faces, but a terrible working memory. You tell me a phone number, like I can't remember it, like from the time I heard it to if I'm holding the phone, right? I just don't have that good of a memory, right? Or a working memory, a short-term memory, right? I know that about myself. That if I got tested, my working memory got tested, right? I would fail miserably. I would look pretty bad, right? But I know what baseline is for me. So there's that. That's criteria number one. Criteria number two, does it interfere with daily function? So all of us, as we age, our memory is going to be less sharp. It's going to be less crisp. We're going to learn things more slowly, right? I'm trying to adapt right now. My husband just switched us to Hulu. Oh my gosh. Does anyone else use this? Like, I don't know how to turn on my own television. I need lessons. I seriously don't know how to turn on my TV at this point. But I know that it's just going to take me longer to learn that than it would have taken me 20 years ago, right? Processing information more slowly, our memory not being as crisp as it used to be. We should expect that as we get older. Our brain is changing, right? It's actually shrinking a little bit. We're losing brain cells, and they're not quite as connected and quite as active as they used to be. But in normal aging, those memory changes, the learning of new information, those changes should not interfere with daily life. I suppose it could be argued that not being able to turn on my television is in fact interfering with my daily life. But I have every confidence I'm going to figure it out any day now, right? But that is to say, so if you and I, for example, saw each other tomorrow, and right now in this moment, you may or may not know that my name is Amy, right? You might have heard that at the beginning, and you might remember that, or by now, you might have totally forgotten that. Right? You see me tomorrow, you're probably not going to remember that my name was Amy, unless you're Kevin, because he knows me, and he should remember my name tomorrow, right? If any one of you can't remember my name tomorrow, I'm not going to worry about that. If Kevin, who I've known for I don't even know how long, can't remember my name tomorrow, I'm going to worry about that, right? That's something that interferes with daily life. The comparison we like to draw is the aging memory. The aging brain is like an old filing cabinet, right? It's harder to get the drawers open than it used to be. The tabs are not as clear, there's a lot of stuff shoved in there, and some things have got filed in the wrong places. But it's still in there, right? As long as it's still in there, it takes you longer to get it, we don't worry about it. If it's no longer there, if you no longer know a word that you used to know, right? A fact about yourself you have forgotten. It's not that you just can't remember what was the name of that street we lived on for that 1 year, 30 years ago. But you no longer remember that you ever lived in that city, right? It's when it's no longer in the filing cabinet that we worry. Yes?
Piggybacking on that, where does mild cognitive impairment come in?
Great question. So I talked about dementia and the dozens of different types of dementia. What is mild cognitive impairment was her question. MCI, if you've ever heard it called that. Mild cognitive impairment is its own diagnosis. It is not dementia. It is not pre-dementia. It is not pre-Alzheimer's disease. There's a lot of confusion. Sometimes we think of it that way. Mild cognitive impairment would be diagnosed, and it is a specific diagnosis, unlike the word dementia. Mild cognitive impairment would be diagnosed when a doctor's done some tests and they can see, yes, there's definitely some significant change here. It's a change from baseline, but it's not so dramatic that it's, keeping you from being able to do what you need to do. It's not interfering with function yet, right? We would call that mild cognitive impairment. Some people will never go on. Mild cognitive impairment will kind of level off and they'll stay at that level for the rest of their life. We know, though, that statistically, the majority of people with MCI, over half, will later go on to get a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. So we consider, or some other kind of dementia. We consider it a risk factor, but the association between them is not clearly understood. It could very well be that what we are actually doing is detecting the Alzheimer's disease when it's sort of in its preclinical stage, and because those folks are seen more regularly by their doctor, they're more likely to get that timely, accurate diagnosis. So it's not totally clear, but about half of people, about 50% of people with MCI will stay that way. It won't get any worse. Within 5 years, about 60% of people with a diagnosis of MCI will have a diagnosis of some type of dementia. And then every year beyond that, it goes up about 12% or so in risk.
So when somebody says they can drive fine, but they have no memory of anything, and they have terrible judgment,
Right.
and they're getting lost.
Right. I wouldn't call that mild cognitive impairment, right? So the criteria for mild cognitive impairment is that there's a change in just one domain, not in multiple domains. So you're having a problem with your memory, but you're not having a problem with cognition, behavior, or physical function. Or you're having problems with behavior, you're having changes with behavior, but everything else is okay, right? Your memory is still okay. If a person, you just described somebody who's having difficulty with memory, judgment,
Falling in love.
so there's physical function, right? That's more than one domain. I would say that's probably beyond the criteria of a mild cognitive impairment diagnosis. Yeah, time for a retest.
So are physicians who care for seniors, aren't they not required to do some training in this?
No.
So they've been treating patients for 20, 30
Yeah.
years, and they ignore the fact?
Yeah. Allow me to step up on my soapbox for a moment. She's asking about a very important issue. Are primary care physicians trained in how to detect, diagnose, and treat people with Alzheimer's and other kinds of dementia? Right? The answer is not necessarily. We are really working hard to. Are you giving me?
Yeah.
Okay. We are really working hard to create some type of requirements in medical school training. It is not yet. So get this: we've got 5.7 million people living with this disease, with Alzheimer's or another kind of dementia. 5.7. 1 in 9 people over the age of 65. 1 in 3 people over the age of 85. Tremendous. Even if you're not a geriatrician, even if you're not a neurologist, right? You've got plenty of patients, no matter what kind of doctor you are, unless you're a pediatrician. Any kind of doctor, right? You've got a lot of patients under your care with dementia. It is still not a required part of their training. Many doctors are recognizing this as a problem, but it is not yet considered sort of standard practice. So we're doing our best to get out there to continuing medical education events, to get in front of them. The County of San Diego is doing tremendous work. I don't know if you've heard at any other time today about the county's Alzheimer's project. Part of the county's Alzheimer's project, a huge countywide undertaking, is to improve Alzheimer's care in lots of different respects, and this is one of them. Increasing the amount of training, helping all primary care physicians be able to do a basic memory screening. Any one of us in this room with an hour of training could administer the basic tools that are used to detect, are there some problems that we should send this person on for some additional testing? So there's no reason primary care physicians can't do this, but often they've just not yet been trained in it. Yeah. Yes?
So then to go back to your first point, which was to get a diagnosis.
Yeah.
And your primary care physicians are the one that can help you get there.
Right.
How do you, because I'm trying to help a family member that's in another state.
Yes.
How do you find the resources to come to a diagnosis?
So tough, but it can be done. So yes, the primary care physician, no matter where you are in the country, is always the place to start. Even if that's not the person, if they don't have the training, if they don't feel comfortable making the diagnosis, that's okay. They are the place to start in terms of reporting changes that you are noticing, right? Getting that on record, because that is, ideally at least, that's the person that knows what baseline was for that person. This is another reason, by the way, that we are advocating for every person over the age of 65 to get a memory screening every year. Medicare actually covers it. Your doctor probably hasn't told you that because your doctor probably doesn't know that, but it's actually covered by Medicare, getting a memory screening every year. That way somebody's going to notice. when there's a change from baseline. But I digress. So starting with that primary care physician, and then what you may need to do is seek out a referral to a specialist. That would most likely be a neurologist. It could also be a psychiatrist, because there's so much overlap between depression and dementia. Psychiatrists are often very, very helpful in the diagnostic process. If you don't know the resource that you need because you're out of state, right, in San Diego, I could tell you 3 places to go right now, right? But if that person is out of state, what you can do is contact either the local chapter of the Alzheimer's Association or contact that primary care physician's office and ask them for referrals to other specialists. Yeah.
So what are the ones in San Diego?
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked. Well, first let me give the general answer. We have a very lengthy list at our office at Alzheimer's San Diego. We have a great team of social workers who you can call, ask for these types of questions. I need to find a neurologist. I need to find a diagnostic clinic or a geriatric psychiatrist. And we're constantly keeping those lists up to date, and they can send you that list and help you sort of go through it and make sense of it and see who might be a good fit for you. So there's the general answer. But I would say the 2 major resources here in San Diego County, first, one of them, I'm drawing a blank on its name, so I'm going to see if it's going to come up in my working memory here right now. UCSD has a department called the MARC, the Memory, Aging, and Resilience Clinic. And that is a comprehensive place for neurocognitive testing. So they can either make an initial diagnosis, or if you've gotten a diagnosis and the doctor gave you that, oh, you have a cough, right? All you've been told is you have dementia. The MARC can help you sort of narrow it down and find out exactly what is going on. The name of the other one has not come to me yet. Anyone, can you help me with it? Pacific, it's in college. It's not Pacific Research. They run clinical trials for Alzheimer's disease.
And they also do a yearly screening.
Yes, they do. Clinical trials, enrolling in clinical trials, by the way, is a great way to get an annual screen because they have to test you pretty regularly. So this is a great way. Enrolling in a clinical trial, even if you don't have any symptoms at all, is a wonderful way to know how you're doing because they're going to test you every 6 months or every year. And you're contributing to Alzheimer's research. The name of this other clinic is going to escape me, but just call us at Alzheimer's San Diego. If it pops up before I leave, I'll yell it out, but it's not coming to me right now. Dr. Ho. Yeah, I've got 5 minutes. Okay. Yes.
With regard to resources that are available to primary caregivers who are also elderly, and I'm talking about my mom who takes care of my father that has MCI. And my sister and I totally get the kindness approach and everything you talked about, not correcting, etc. But my mom cannot get over that. She keeps treating my dad as if she's talking to the 50-year-old man rather than the 85-year-old man. And so what we want to know is what is a good resource that we can take her to that she can learn, I don't know, for someone at her age level, some of her generation who could be able to learn how to approach my father in a more kind way, without feeling as if she is doing something wrong.
Right.
And,
So there's on the one hand, like my ideal answer is we'll send her to my classes, right? She'll come learn from me. But I know that's not going to be the right answer for every person because that often makes people feel it's very overwhelming and it makes people feel like, oh my gosh, I've been doing everything wrong, right? I understand that.
She would totally feel that way.
Okay.
She's very defensive.
I would start with a support group. Oh, I don't have that up anymore. But connecting her to a local support group where she can learn from her peers, right? She will hear very quickly. We're again, taking advantage of our social nature as learners, right? By listening to what other people are experiencing and how it's working for them, right? All the things that they tried for 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, beating their head against the wall, trying to correct the person, talking to them as the person that they used to be, right? Learning from their experiences can be very, very powerful. So I would start with that. Just let her know, Mom, there are 250,000 people living here in San Diego County who are dealing with the same things you are, day in and day out. Let's help you find some of them, connect with them, and talk to them and see what they're doing. But I would also recommend just if you keep doing it, right? You can model that. If she can see that when you don't argue, when you join him in his experience wherever he is, if she can see how he is transformed by that, she'll learn from that as well. So keep modeling that behavior for her. Yeah.
So how do you distinguish mild than moderate and severe?
Great question. So what are the different stages of the disease? There are medical or numerical staging models for Alzheimer's and other kinds of dementia. There's a 6-point scale, there's a 7-point scale. We keep it very simple at Alzheimer's San Diego. We call it early or mild, middle or moderate, and late or severe. And the marker that we use, there is no moment that you've moved from early to middle. It's very gray, but the general marker that we use is how much assistance does a person need with daily care tasks. If they're totally independent with those things, we'd still call that early stage. If they need some help, and that could mean a variety of things. They need reminders, they need a schedule, or they need somebody physically to provide that help. If they need some help with daily tasks. And I'm not talking about driving, I'm not talking about paying bills and managing medications. Those are complex things that people can need help with even in the early stages of the disease. I'm talking about taking a shower, being able to eat, being able to get dressed, right? Do one's own oral hygiene. When a person needs help either being reminded to do those things or some physical prompting to do them, we call that middle stage. And then when they are fully reliant upon other people for those tasks, maybe they physically can still do them, but they wouldn't ever remember to do them, right? Without somebody to provide that help, we would call that late. So those are the general markers that we use. There was a question over here. Yes?
Yeah, it was to the last question that she asked about engaging. Glenner is maybe a place you could check out also.
Yes. The Glen, thank you for saying that. I happen to sit on their advisory board, so I'm glad you know about them. The Glenner Alzheimer's Family Centers is San Diego's and actually the country's longest provider of adult day services for people with dementia. These are adult day programs designed specifically for people with memory loss due to Alzheimer's or other kinds of dementia.
GLE-NME?
Yes, it was somebody's last name. He was actually a pathologist who worked in Alzheimer's disease, George G. Glenner. Their full name is the George G. Glenner Alzheimer's Family Centers.
In Town Square.
Yes. So they currently operate 3 adult day programs in the county and are any moment now going to be opening a new one down in Chula Vista called the Town Square, which is a really lovely indoor replica of a little city. So during the day, they don't live there, but during the day, individuals will be able to do activities at different sites around the town. It's very cool. Glenner.org.
Go and see it. It's the only one of its kind in the United States.
It's remarkable.
So they're leading the way. And you can take a tour.
I know that I'm out of time, I see it. What I will do is encourage you, on your handout, our phone number is at the bottom. Call us anytime, Monday through Friday. Call us anytime, starting Monday at 8:30 a.m. I mean, you can call us right now, just nobody's going to answer. Ask your questions, connect to resources. We can get you the name of that diagnostic clinic that I still haven't remembered. Or just give you a friendly, understanding voice to talk to. We can help you find a support group. We run a volunteer respite program, and we can connect you to any of these other resources that are here. You learned a lot here at this event today, not just here, but in this, all the information that you've collected. It's a lot to take in, and you don't have to remember it all. Just remember that we're here, right? Just give us a call.